I want to play you something that presidential candidate Andrew Yang said about Flint, which by the way, I've reached out to Yang's people two or three times to get an interview. Haven't heard back yet. But I thought this clip was interesting because I haven't heard many presidential candidates talk about Flint. Here we go.
So you call for prioritizing sustainable infrastructure in urban development, right? And taking advantage of new materials and designs. And I think there is no city that would be ground zero for that than Flint, Michigan.
Yes, I agree.
And so what type of plan would you have specifically for Flint, Michigan as president?
At this point, it's like a national tragedy / embarrassment that the people in Flint still have unsafe drinking water. And the problem is that the United States of America has gotten really bad at building and rebuilding, where what's happened is you have this very old set of pipes that have then contaminated the drinking water for this population, and all of these families and children are suffering as a result. The problem is that those resources would theoretically come from the state of Michigan, and Michigan does not have the resources to say, like, look, we need to just redo this. Like what they did is they tried to save a few bucks here and there, and then it ended up, and then they tried to sort of hand wave away the fact that this contamination was happening. So I will vow as president, we're going to make the drinking water in Flint crystal safe as can be, and whatever that takes. And if that takes federal money going in and just tearing out all of those pipes and rebuilding them from ground zero, then that's what we're going to do. And if the state of Michigan doesn't have the will to do that, then we'll do it as a federal government.
Do you feel that as president that there should be a federal inquiry into what happened?
Yes. And the thing is, like, Flint is a national symbol, but there are other Flints. Flint is not an isolated case in the sense that there are other decaying water systems that are now funneling contaminated water to children in other communities. And this is, in many ways, an emblem of what's going wrong in our country, is that these systems were built decades ago, sometimes in cases where they didn't even know that some of this stuff existed. And then we've let it decay over decades because we've just gotten terrible at actually building or rebuilding anything in this country. Our infrastructure is falling apart. And then, of course, it's poor communities that get ignored politically that end up bearing the brunt of it.
That was from theroot.com. I don't know why they have music playing underneath him. It's kind of weird. There's a point that Andrew Yang made that I think is important. And by the way, I'm waiting for an answer from Bernie Sanders, campaign chairman. I've posed a few questions to Faiz Shakir, which is his campaign chairman. One of my questions was on Flint and this. But remember, what this documentary is about and what the story Jen and I broke, the state of Michigan manipulated the testing and the data from 2016 all the way to last year. They were flushing in many homes, and flushing, again, artificially lowers the lead levels. We only knocked on 450 doors, only. It was a lot to do that. It took us both the summer and the fall. We did it in 105-degree weather in many cases over the summer last year. It was laborious, but we would do it again. Now, we found that the testing was manipulated. We found that the testing was compromised. As Aaron Brockovich said in our story that we broke, this is cheating. The testing should be tossed. Free water distribution that was discontinued because of this data, where Governor Rick Snyder declared the water's restored, citing this data, should be tossed, and the distribution should be reopened while actually independent testers do this testing. Not the state of Michigan, who caused the problem in the first place, not even the federal government. Independent testing without government grants should do the testing, and it should be monitored by experts in addition to Flint residents. Every sample. Because at the root of the problem, how do you know if Flint's lead levels are now again meeting EPA regulations if the data was cooked? And I think Andrew Yang, I haven't heard many other presidents, Tulsi Gabbard has spoken on it, Bernie Sanders has spoken on it, but there is this media distortion because the media and the journalists just simply pass off as stenography what Rick Snyder and the EPA and the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality said without actually looking into the numbers, without actually doing what we did, which was knocking on those doors. We spoke with we spoke with 150 residents. We found 35 homes where this improper flushing happened. And by the way, they were all on the record. We spoke with all of them on the record. We got the tapes to prove it. As I've told you, in February, we met with some of the highest ranking government officials in the state of Michigan about what we found. Trust me, they wouldn't meet with us if we hadn't presented to them the goods before. I can't go into detail of anything past that meeting or what is happening now. I can't share that, unfortunately. But what I can say is we met with some of the highest ranking officials in Michigan. So actual door knocking, actual old school journalism that you funded us to be there. Jen and I didn't have the money to stay out there for 3 weeks in the summer and a week this fall. It came from you, from the GoFundMe, from membership. Actually can create results. I'm not guaranteeing something's going to come of that meeting, but I can tell you I have had follow-up discussions with those officials. So I wish I could tell you more, but I just can't for reasons that you'll understand later. But what Andrew Yang makes the point, we need to basically debunk this myth that has been spread by the state of Michigan, by the media stenographers, the Flint Journal, Detroit Free Press, Detroit News, I could go on, by the national outlets, that, Flint's water is now meeting federal regulations again. The testing data was compromised. This is not a conspiracy theory. You're going to see in this documentary the testing data was manipulated because either dozens of residents imagined ghosts from the state of Michigan entering their home and running their water before testing for them. And in a lot of cases, too, the state of Michigan didn't do it, but officials verbally gave the residents the instructions, run your water before testing, which is against the EPA's lead and copper rule. And these were all residents that were on the official state testing program. It was called the Sentinel testing program. This is the focus group that Governor Snyder and the state of Michigan used to say they continued to test these homes, and now Flint's lead levels are back under EPA regulations, so we could start taking away resources. And why this is important? It ain't just about Flint. As Andrew Yang talked about, this is happening in other cities. EPA and state environmental agencies are known to doctor and manipulate testing numbers to game the system. Michigan, the city of Flint, and Michigan Department of Environmental Quality for a long time were pre-flushing before taking samples. Pre-flushing is when you run the water the night before the morning test, which cleans out potentially high levels of lead, so you get a false lower number. What we found was actually worse than pre-flushing. We found flushing. Pre-flushing is when you do it the night before the morning test. Flushing is when you do it right before the test, day of. Pre-flushing, although frowned upon by the EPA, is not explicitly prohibited. It's not banned. Flushing is. You cannot flush a sample before you cannot if you're sampling for the EPA's lead and copper rule, if you're collecting samples to meet EPA regulations for a city or a municipality, you cannot run the water right before testing. It is against the EPA's lead and copper rule. Shamefully, as you'll find out in this documentary, the EPA is helping to cover up what? The Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. But at the root of all this, children and adults might still be drinking contaminated water. And there's more than just lead. There's bacteria issues, there's PFAS, PFAS, that is now a concern all around the country. Cancer-causing chemicals made in the manufacturing of Teflon. They've been found in North Carolina and the Ohio River Valley and many other places, including Michigan. They were found in other parts of Michigan last year. And those parts were middle-class white people, so Governor Snyder, was he pretty quick to respond to that. Flint took 18 months for them to admit there was an issue. Is there a difference between Flint and those white areas? Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statusquo.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statusquo.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.